Decay in the main deck, and then Golgari Charm in the sideboard.
Yeah, both of these players have decided that the black base is where they want to be, but Joe is more of a fan of the devotion aspect, having the gray merchants as well as the Erebos in the sideboard. Josh much prefers the elimination spells, taking out the devotion and adding in Blood Barons, as well as a few other elimination spells, but mostly playing it for the protection from white and protection from black cleric. As we see, Josh Joe won the die roll, and he's going to lead off with a pair of Temple of Silence. That one's going to scry to the bottom. Joe leads off with a Guildgate. He's not going to get the new temple for Golgari for a little bit.
Just got to wait one more week, I think.
That's right. And there's a Pack Rat on turn 2 for Joe. See if Josh has an answer, and he does. Hero's Downfall on the Pack Rat.
Pack Rat leads to a lot of runaway games in the mirror, but both decks equipped also with a lot of removal spells. So it's infrequent, but some percentage of the time a turn 2 Pack Rat will just simply go uncontested.
An untapped Overgrown Tomb means Joe goes to 18 in order to play Night Veil Spectre, and Josh moves to his 4th turn, deciding where he wants to go from here.
Night Veil Spectre, of course, another very threatening card in the mirror, and similar matchups as so many of the spells overlap and are easy to cast.
Going to lead off with Duress, does Josh Cho, and he's going to spy a whole mess of kill spells. Oh, just 2, actually. I thought there were more than that. He's going to see 2 Gray Merchants in addition to 2 kill spells, a Hero's Downfall and an Abrupt Decay, as well as Golgari Guildgate.
Duress you don't see very frequently in main decks. You generally see the 4 Thoughtseizes and then Duresses in the sideboard, which is actually a little surprising to me. There's so many matchups in the metagame where Duress is close to as effective as Thoughtseize. Josh has moved 2 into his main deck for this tournament.
Yeah, as you see, we have his deck denoted as black-white control, not black-white mid-range, as we sometimes referred to it, because he's got an Elspeth, he's got more discard spells, he's got fewer creatures, a much leaner deck. He also drops Ratchet Bomb out of the main deck, so that will be able to take care of random Pack Rats on the other side of the board, for example, as Joe is going to get in with his Night Veil Spectre and find Underworld connections.
Not shabby, although even though that's very good for Joe, remember that Josh does have this Ratchet Bomb in play. He's trying to set to 3 anyway because of the Night Veil Spectre, and so Joe will get some cards out of this, and if he finds an Abrupt Decay, that's very good for him, but unlikely to completely run away with the game of the Underworld connections.
Josh finds Devour Flesh on top and plays Mutavault as his next land. 5 lands in play currently. This is typically where you see Blood Baron come to play. But instead, we're going to attack for 2 with Mutavaults and then drop Devour Flesh, bringing Joe back up to 20.
Yeah, and Josh, you know, even with that Ratchet Bomb in play, Josh really can't afford to take that many Night Veil Spectre hits, and you see Joe pick up an Abrupt Decay off the top, which is excellent for him as it allows him to get rid of this Ratchet Bomb and possibly run away with the game with Underworld connections.
He also has a pair of Hero's Downfalls in his hand, so he's going to be able to take care of whatever Josh plays that isn't an Underworld connections of his own. Thoughtseize is going to be the first thing, and Josh shows a hand of a pair of Swamps.
And for as far ahead as Joe is right now, these are the exact kind of games against Mono Black, or Black Green in this case, where a Blood Baron off the top can steal it.
And guess what just showed up?
As if on cue.
It's almost like you planned it that's exactly how we drew it up.
Yeah.
As Josh Cho finds Blood Baron of Vizkopa right off the top of his deck. And in comes Blood Baron of Vizkopa. Joe Abrupt Decays the Ratchet Bomb, and Josh clearly not particularly happy about that, so Joe's going to be able to untap and keep using Josh's Underworld connections against him. But he's now facing down a 4/4 that now has Devour Flesh protection. And so how does Black-Green dig out of this?
He's got to set up a turn where he's able to use other removal spells to kill the Mutavaults while also having Devour Flesh available. So it's asking a lot.
That's a lot of Mutavaults, though. There's one of them gone. So Joe's only going to take 6 this turn, falling to 9. 3 Mutavaults is a whole lot to protect Devour Flesh. And so these Heroes Downfalls are pretty much going to have to trade with Mutavaults because Abrupt Decay can't kill them. It says target non-land permanent, even though it can become a creature. Joe's got to keep digging, finds the Devour Flesh, so he finds the final piece to the puzzle, but he's going to be he's going to need to find answers to these mutavaults before they kill him as well.
And mana is a constraint as well, as Joe has to set up a turn of multiple kill spells. Requires a lot of mana, a lot of things to go the right way. He does have a couple Great Merchants in his hand, which buys him some time, you know, to piece together the sequence that he needs, but it will be difficult for him to cobble together an answer for Blood Baron.
Yeah, and those Gray Merchants aren't really going to be a win condition at this point because Josh is going to be gaining 4 life a turn. As Joe decides to pass the turn here.
Yeah, he's trying to set up, he's hopefully hoping that Josh will attack with his Mutavaults, and he can basically set up this sequence over multiple turns of using some mana this turn to get rid of 1 Mutavault, which lessens the amount of mana he needs in subsequent turns to kill active Mutavaults and then edict away the Blood Baron.
And so Josh just brings in the 2 Mutavaults. One gets Heroes Downfalled, and the other one joins Blood Baron in the red zone to drop Joe to 2. He's going to go to 1 to keep digging for answers, see if he can find something. Little rub for luck on the table. It's fine. It's a pack rat. Usually very good, not particularly in this situation.
But Great Merchant essentially gives him another look at it, assuming that Josh hasn't drawn a removal spell.
And there is Gray Merchant of Asphodel. Draining for 4 thanks to the Underworld connections on Joe's side of the board. So he'll go to 5. Josh will go to 22. And Josh is going to untap. And Joe drawing a little bit thin here. He really needs to have Josh draw nothing, basically, over the next several turns. That Thoughtseize is going to be a problem, though.
That's a backbreaker, as he knows that Josh is going to be able to take the Edict, and then there's no way for him to get out from the Blood Baron.
Yep, and there's a fist pump from Josh, being able to beat pretty much a very good top of the deck of Nightveil Spectre from Joe, and Josh is going to be able to steal game 1 as we move to sideboards.
So Joe has 3 additional, sorry, not 3 additional. He has 3 copies of Duress in his sideboard he could bring in. He has 3 copies of Lifebane Zombie. I anticipate this coming in because Blood Baron is specifically a card that he's trying to answer. 3 copies of Dark Betrayal, of course, excellent against Josh's primarily black creature base. He can bring in 2 copies of Golgari Charm if he wants to fight over Underworld Connection specifically, but I think Abrupt Decay and the discard basically cover you there. And he has a single copy of Erebos that I expect to come in as well.
I also think that Gaze of Granite is a little bit interesting. It can be a late answer to a Blood Baron. It can also answer Underworld Connections, but you need to get to that point in the game.
Additionally, the decks have so many overlapping permanents that a symmetrical sweeper like that, especially one that's expensive, can be really challenging to set up. And in the case of Underworld Connections, a lot of damage can be done in the interim while you're waiting to get it going. So.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, over on Josh's side of the board, he's got 2 Obsidian Ghost Council, 3 Sin Collector, 3 Lifebane Zombie, 3 Dark Betrayal, 2 Doomblade, I don't expect those this game, and a singleton of Duress and a singleton of Farika's Cure. I would anticipate probably these Obsidots are going to come in. Sin Collector's a possibility. I don't think it's particularly good in this matchup, as most of the things you're afraid of are enchantments and creatures. But it will pick off a random Hero's Downfall or something like that, maybe an Abrupt Decay. And of course, Dark Betrayal.
Yeah, I think that Sin Collector is pretty good in these kind of games because you're often just trying to clear a path for one threat. Blood Baron's the most obvious one. Elspeth comes up from time to time. Usually these black decks only have one answer that can answer those kind of threat cards. Only Hero's Downfall really answers Elspeth in the long term. Only Devour Flesh can stop Blood Baron. And so Sin Collector gives you a lot of information and it allows you to know which door is open for which of your threats that are otherwise very challenging to remove. The Obsidians are another curious case. I think that primarily they're in people's sideboards for matchups where the opponent has Mizzium Mortars, as Blood Baron's quite bad against Mizzium Mortars, and Obsidian is very good in those kind of matchups and against that card specifically. I don't know if he wants it here. Of course, cards like Dark Betrayal answer it very efficiently, as does Hero's Downfall. But in the post-board games, the games often get slower. Both players are becoming more reactive, bringing in more answers, more discard, and often it's about the last threat standing. So even though Obsidian isn't well-suited for the matchup in the abstract, both players have a lot of answers. It's difficult to get into play. It's possible, given the nature of the matchup, that Obsidian has a home in the post-board games.
Yeah, well, the problem is, of course, if Lifebane Zombie makes an appearance, it's another 5-drop that Lifebane Zombie can snag, even if you're trying to hit a Blood Baron on turn 4, let's say, right before he's about to play the Blood Baron, accidentally picking off an Obsidian.
Yeah, Lifebane Zombie is definitely another consideration as well.
So we'll see where the players go from here. Both these players sitting at 7-1. A win here will put them in position to possibly be able to draw in the last round.
Yep. we're close to the ceiling of a 10-round tournament.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the threshold,
ceiling is 702. We're at 643.
and the floor is.
The floor is 430-ish.
So we're on the large side
We're
of 10
on the
rounds.
large side of 10 rounds.
Which generally speaking means some percentage of the X1 and 1s can make it. The ones near the top of the standings after round 9. Some of them will have to play out the final round.
Yeah. So these players are shuffling up, getting ready for the last game.
For those of you just joining us, Patrick Sullivan, Ruben Bresler, we're in round 9 of 10, the Standard Open here in Baltimore, Maryland. Josh Cho, Joe Jancuk sitting at X and 1, potentially in a position, the winner here to intentionally draw into top 8 in the next round. The loser almost certainly out of top 8 contention.
And Josh Cho won game 1. The black-white control deck is really suited to fight against the black devotion decks.
Yeah, Joe got ahead on cards. He had unchecked underworld connections. Usually in the mono black mirror, that correlates very strongly to winning the game. But Josh ripped an unchecked Blood Baron, and that was enough to steal game 1.
Yep, and we get started here, and Joe is going to start out with Thoughtseize. And he's going to see a pair of Blood Barons, as well as Lifebane Zombie and a Dark Betrayal and 3 lands. The Dark Betrayal exits the screen so quickly you might not have even seen it if you weren't paying attention, leaving Josh with only the 3 creatures. Mutavault off the top from Josh, and he's going to lead with Orzhov Guildgate.
These are the kind of draws where Josh is really susceptible to getting pack ratted.
Yep, but he doesn't have it. Joe not only doesn't have pack rat, but he also doesn't have a 3rd land just yet. And there is a pack rat. So he had the Guildgate for the turn 3 pack rat, but no 3rd land. As we see Hero's Downfall on the pack rat. 3 Underworld Connections is more than the number of lands that Joe currently has available to him. And so Josh Cho is going to be able to keep making his land drops on the way to landing a Blood Baron before Joe is really able to get any sort of game plan going.
And what's really critical here, there's 2 things going on. One is that, as you see a Lifebane Zombie here, Josh has 2 Blood Barons, so he can afford to run one of them into an Edict. Additionally, he has a Mutavault in play, which gives him additional Edict insurance. So Josh is, the pacing in the game, obviously, Joe's missing land drops. Josh is on pace to be able to get the Blood Baron without too much going on the board. He also has insurance against Devour Flushes. He's also looking at Joe's hand right now and seeing that there is no Devour Flush.
Yep. And so that Abrupt Decay is going to take out that Lifebane Zombie, and a 3rd land off the top is going to be able to snag one of those Blood Barons. So Josh might want to try to play this one on turn 5. Now the danger there is, do you play around Devour Flesh or do you play around top deck Lifebane Zombies?
Yeah.
He decides that he's going to play around possible top deck Lifebane Zombies. Joe doesn't have an answer to the Blood Baron currently. Instead, he has 3 Underworld Connections and a Nightveil Spectre.
Yeah, I think the possibility of also getting Thoughtseize there is enough to push the decision over the top. Josh is, going to put his opponent on a 1-turn window to find an Edict, and if he doesn't have it, then Josh is in great position.
So Josh is going to be able to get the 4/4 lifelink protection from Black Train going this turn. He does also have all the mana he could ever want and a Mutavault in play. All the colors of mana, I should say.
Right.
He does want to try to get to 6 for his one of Elspeth, Sun's Champion, and to play multiple spells in a turn and activate Underworld Connections and the like. But for now, he's happy with just a 4/4 lifelinker protection from your deck.
And there's a possibility here that we're seeing something of a repeat of game 1, where all the card advantage in the world is not going to allow Joe to just beat a Blood Baron.
And so Thoughtseize targets Joe, and that's going to snag the Nightveil Spectre, leaving Joe with 2 more copies of Underworld Connections.
And I like that play a lot from Josh. The instinct there is to take Underworld Connections is more powerful, but Josh is already conceding the card advantage fight. Joe has Underworld Connections, and Josh doesn't have any of his own, so try to make this into a tempo game.
Now, Joe does find the Devour Flesh, so if he is able to find a 2-mana kill spell for the Mutavault, and that doesn't do it right there, because that can't target lands, of course, that Abrupt Decay. He'll need to find a Hero's Downfall at some point in the near future.
And the way that this game is going, the draws that are critical for Josh right now are actually additional creatures, as bad as they generally are in the Black Mirror match. Anything that taxes Joe's removal, causes him to spend mana killing other things, means it it's less likely that the Devour Flesh ultimately tags Blood Baron, which is Joe's path to victory here.
And Josh does not find another creature. So if Joe is somehow able to find another kill spell on top of his deck, he's going to be able to use that Devour Flesh to get rid of this Blood Baron before it completely overruns him. Joe has not found it just yet, instead finding Thoughtseize and the 4th Underworld connections.
The 4th one, not nearly as good as the first one.
Not even nearly as good as the 3rd one, I don't think. As the 3rd one hasn't even entered the battlefield yet. We see 2 Mutavaults. Those are gonna try and trade with the Blood Baron, or at least hold the Blood Baron off. They might be doing an okay job of it as Josh draws his card and leans back in his chair. Doesn't really know how to proceed here. A little bit of pensive look on his face.
Yeah, and you know, certainly the long game is not favoring him against these 2 Underworld connections, so it's critical for him to win this game quickly, and if he can't, then Joe is likely to generate a large edge over time here.
As he's already, I would imagine he's drawn double-digit more cards than Josh this game, and he does find the Hero's Downfall, so he's going to be able to combine the Hero's Downfall with the Devour Flesh to be able to kill both the Mutavault and the Blood Baron. Thoughtseize takes a gander at Josh's pair of lands, being a little bit flooded this game.
And now I believe he can actually set up Hero's Downfall and Devour Flesh in the same turn.
Yep. And so with that resolved, but with the Devour Flesh still on the stack, Hero's Downfall will take down the Mutavault, Devour Flesh will take down the Blood Baron. Josh will go to 30, now go to 27 with Joe only at 6, but the long game still does not favor Josh Cho.
Although Josh definitely still has some top decks left. Another Blood Baron, potentially offset. Joe's hand is still pretty bad. It's just more Underworld connections and Abrupt Decay. So Joe is not quite out of the woods just yet.
And Joe only has 6 life, so those Underworld connections aren't really going to be able to do him any good unless he manages to find a Gray Merchant to gain some more life or something along those lines.
Now Josh is playing the white splash of the deck, which means no Gray Merchant in his list.
Yes. And so in comes 7 power, dropping Josh back down to his starting life total of 20. And a Dark Betrayal was his draw for the turn, so that'll slow the march of the 3-1, I suppose. But doesn't really answer the main problem he's facing down, which are these Underworld connections. Joe gets a Temple of Mystery.
Those are additional scry lands that allow him to cast Nightveil Spectre.
Yep.
So it's a green source of mana that also casts Nightveil.
And in come the 7 power again. Dark Betrayal is going to take down the 3-1. Josh goes to 16. Still has a turn or 3 to be able to find what he's looking for, but not a ton.
Yeah, but his 5-mana creatures are still live draws.
Yep, all 6 of his 5-mana creatures are going to be live draws, and there is one of them. There is a Blood Baron. We'll see if Joe is able to find another Devour Flesh to be able to handle it. Joe is only at 5, but he does have those 2 Mutavaults.
Yes.
To be able to prevent Josh from attacking. So we might just be at a standstill, which still favors Joe because he's just going to keep drawing those cards.
Yeah.
He'll be able to draw 4 more cards before he has to stop.
Yeah, and any Gray Merchant he finds here is also quite bad for Josh.
There's an Erebos. That's going to prevent Josh's life gain at least, but doesn't really matter at this point.
It's another big body. I mean,
Yeah.
But he's looking for some really specific cards, and I think he just found one.
He found a Gray Merchant on top. So with 7 mana, he will be able to use the Gray Merchant to gain 6. That'll put him to 9. Or I'm sorry, he'll be able to gain more than that. There's Lifebane Zombie, 2, 4, 6, 8 to go to 11.
Gives him quite a bit of a cushion here. He now only has 1 Mutavault back, so he's no longer threatening to trade with the Blood Baron, but the additional life means he doesn't care about that too much this turn.
And so Josh draws his card, and it looks like it is...
I believe he drew a Sin Collector.
Sin Collector, okay. There is Sin Collector targeting Joe. That's going to be able to snag the Abrupt Decay, revealing Erebos, another copy of Underworld Connections, as well or 2 more copies of Underworld Connections. And in comes the Blood Baron, attacking Joe down to 7, and Josh goes to 12.
So Josh still barely hanging on here, but he is really struggling.
Yeah, he's going to need for Joe to not really be able to top deck an answer to the Blood Baron there, and also not die to top deck to Gray Merchants going forward.
Right, and
as he is only at 12.
Yeah, and Erebus is also going to close the door here, as now the Blood Baron is no longer pulling him back ahead in life in terms of the damage race.
So that 5/7 is active, and Joe is going to represent lethal next turn as Josh draws his card. And Joe would only fall to 3, and as we mentioned earlier, Josh does not have Gray Merchant in his deck to effectively fireball his opponent. Played the Godless Shrine from his hand and passed the turn right back to Joe, who might be able to pull this one out thanks to those Underworld Connections, and indeed, it looks like he will, as Gray Merchant of Asphodel, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9.
I believe this is
that 9?
11 in play.
11 in play. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in play. And in response, Devour Flesh, activate Mutavault to counter it, and that'll be the game. So Joshua Cho falls in game 2. Joe Jancuk gets game 2. They're going to be tied 1-1, and we're going to go to game 3.
So in that game, Joe was able to engineer an answer to the first Blood Baron, and after that, he was up so many cards because of those Underworld Connections. Finishing the game was pretty elementary.
Yeah, as much of a trump as Blood Baron is, if you're being buried under card advantage, it oftentimes doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it was really critical that game for Joe to have those Mutavaults. Otherwise, that Blood Baron may have gone unchecked, but there were a couple critical turns there that Josh wasn't able to attack with his Blood Baron, and that gave Joe the space he needed to draw a bunch of extra cards and then eventually convert those cards into an advantage.
Mutavault, I saw this stat recently. Mutavault is seeing more play in Standard than Brainstorm is in Legacy.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive stat for any card, let alone a colorless land.
Well, Mutavault's opportunity cost is much lower. Brainstorm means that you have to put blue mana in your deck. Maybe
Sure.
You're not interested in blue for, besides Brainstorm, but Mutavault is just a colorless land. It can really, the only decks it doesn't really go into are some Devotion builds, which are very color mana sensitive. They're trying to play Astalin into Boros Reckoner into Fnatic Amogus. Even some decks in that space find room for a Mutavault or two. We find Mutavaults in blue-white control. Gerard Fabiano's Esper list. We had another Esper, board control list that was doing well in this tournament. On camera after Fabiano, that deck was also playing Mutavaults alongside blue cards and Obsidat. So,
sure. You would think that that the 3-color decks of the format would be the ones that wouldn't be playing the colorless lands, but Mutavault is so powerful.
Yeah, and the lands already don't allow you to extend yourself that far in the colors that you're playing. We're not in Ravnica duels alongside N10 duels alongside Farseeks. You already kind of have to paint inside the lines a little bit, and Mutavault's so powerful that it compels you even further to be conservative with your mana as much as possible and try to find a way to fit in Mutavaults.
Yeah, both of these players are playing Guild Gates, to be fair. So
sure.
The mana bases are not nearly as powerful as they were when Glacial Fortress and Friends were in Standard.
But I like it as a departure. Mana shouldn't always be free.
I agree.
I like some Standard formats having good mana and then some having worse mana. It causes other cards to get played that otherwise wouldn't when the mana is more challenging, because you really have to dig deeper to find cards to fill out your deck list. It's also cool to let people have free reign and play whatever they want to sometimes. So just mixing it up is the correct strategy, I think.
So as we move to game 3, Josh Cho is going to be on the play here in round 9, game 3. And he is going to ponder his decision here, thinking hard.
Well, I think since Joe has mulligan, that means Josh is already kept, I suspect.
Okay.
As Joe is on the draw, I would imagine in this game.
Well, he didn't look too happy about his keep, I guess, but Joe is going to be mulliganing down to 6.
Individual card count matters a lot in this matchup. It's a lot about trading resources one for one. Though both decks also have a habit of, in the post-board games, ripping their hands to shreds, and then it's often about who just draws better. who's the first person to find an Underworld Connections or a Blood Baron or a Pack Rat that
or
goes uncontested.
unanswered Night Veil Spectre acts
Sure.
like card draw in this matchup, as they're both able to play all of the cards. But certainly, mulliganing decisions are key in this mirror with so many Thoughtseizes and Duresses, as we see. A Thoughtseize on turn 1 is going to be able to either target an Abrupt Decay, an Erebos, or a Thoughtseize alongside Joe's 3 lands. Oh, it's 2 lands and a Duress was the last card, so he does have 2 discard spells.
I imagine the most threatening card in this hand is the Erebos, unless Josh has a very specific line he's trying to set up. You can allow Joe to have discard and some removal spells. You can work around those with your own discard spells with certain creatures off the top, 4 and 5 mana creatures, but Erebos gives Joe a long-term plan. A lot of this also depends on how Joshua's hand is set up as well. So.
Right, if Josh wants to play turn 2 Pack Rat, for example, or if he's got a Blood Baron that he wants to keep hidden, then the Thoughtseize is the more powerful card, and that is what he ends up going with because he does have the Blood Baron in his hand. Joe leads with a Guild Gate. Josh scries with his Temple of Silence and keeps it there. Moving on to Joe's second turn, there is the Duress. And it shows 2 creatures and 3 lands, so that one's going to whiff.
And you can see why Josh took Thoughtseize out of this hand, as he's so light on action that he can't afford to trade 1-for-1 with that Thoughtseize.
He did keep the 7, but he had to make his decision first. And so then when Joe mulliganed, perhaps Josh was thinking that maybe he should have mulliganed as well. But he kept. Looks like he's going to be able to play a pretty good aggressive game plan here, although there's a top-decked Lifebane Zombie to take one of the Blood Barons, but Josh top-decked the second, so.
One of these players' Lifebane Zombies is much better than the other.
Agreed. Josh finds another land. And Joe elects to not trade Lifebane Zombie for Lifebane Zombie. So Josh is able to sneak in 3 damage there. Temple of Silence scries once again to the top. It's possible that it's an untapped land because oh no, that's a Godless Shrine, so it's probably not an untapped land.
This is a very small thing, but I think I would have played one of Josh's other comes to play tap lands last turn, since I guess the Guild Gate. Since his next turn is already accounted for and he's looking for action, and he's playing against discard, he doesn't really want to scry a spell on top of his deck and then leave it in his hand for a turn to potentially get tagged by discard. I would have preferred to wait until after the turn where he's played the Blood Baron to play the scry land, as then he can cast anything that he leaves on top of the deck. This is a very small thing, but I don't think that was the best time for him to scry necessarily.
Sure. Turn 5 Blood Baron of Viscopa for Josh. It looks like that small possible mistake isn't really going to punish him, as Joe top-decked a Gray Merchant, which really doesn't impact Josh's side of the board.
Well, people's instinct is always just to play the scry land first because it gives you a power, but you can actually time it in some positions, you know, slightly better than others.
Yeah, if you have your next several turns planned out, perhaps scrying later is a better option because you'll have more information later on. In comes the Lifebane Zombie and the Blood Baron. Abrupt Decay takes care of the Lifebane Zombie, and it looks like no follow-up. Devour Flesh there. In with the Blood Baron.
So remember, that Erebos is shutting off the Blood Baron's life gain, so Josh is still susceptible to getting damage race in this game. Still susceptible to getting burned out from Gray Merchant, as you see right here.
And so he does take 5. Josh should not have gained the 4 life there. I believe he's still at 13.
Yeah. I think both players are aware of that. Erebos' anti-life gain power, not a trigger, simply a static ability, and so no way for it to be missed.
So Gray Merchant not only drains for 5, but also turns on Erebos. Josh is at 8 life, and in comes both Lifebane Zombie and Erebos.
And this would be a lot different if Josh was able to gain life. I mean, then it's a race. But the way it is now, he's sort of up against it.
Yeah, behind the 8 ball here.
He could really use a removal spell to shut off Erebos inside of combat, but based on what we've seen out of his hand and his reaction here, it doesn't look like he has a way to break up Devotion this turn.
Yeah, this looks like it's going to be a Pack Rat activation, getting rid of an extraneous land to be able to either stand in front of the Erebos or block and kill the Lifebane Zombie. Still not ideal, as a Gray Merchant is going to be able to take care of any of those. And even a kill spell next turn from Joe is probably going to choke Josh off of enough mana that he's not going to be able to activate the Pack Rat twice.
Yeah.
And so discarding Orzhov Guildgate, making a Pack Rat. And now Josh has to decide whether he's blocking one creature or both creatures, and if it is one creature, which one he wants to block.
Yes.
What do you think you would do here? Would you try to kill off the Lifebane Zombie or save more damage standing in front of the Erebos?
I think you have to get Lifebane Zombie off. The only way you can win this game right now is to cut Joe off of Devotion. So I think that you have to block. And you probably also can't beat another double black spell off the top, turning Erebos back on. So try to play under the assumption that Joe is going to be missing for a turn or two, and then your Pack Rat might actually be able to take over.
It looks like the Rat is going to stand in front of the 3/1 Intimidator, and Josh will fall to 3.
Now, did Joe leave? Joe left on top of the Skyland, right?
I believe so, yes.
So that is possibly an indicator that he has a way to turn Devotion back on. And if that's the case, then that gives Josh a pretty large incentive to double block. He also has Erebus in play to draw cards, so he may be able, even if it's not on top, there's a reasonable chance he gets another crack at it with his draw steps.
Josh is going to elect to keep on swinging with the Blood Baron, and that's going to drop Joe to 11. And Josh passes the turn, and there is a Gray Merchant in hand. And in response, Last Breath, to be able to not die to the Gray Merchant plus attack activation. And so Josh takes 3, and Erebos is not active again. And so that Last Breath actually canceled out the attack, but also canceled out a possible win from Joe's deck.
Yeah, but it's just very hard for Josh to keep Joe off of Devotion for the remainder of the game, since Joe is able to draw so many cards. He has a lot of life from his Gray Merchants from that Last Breath that we just saw. And Josh, again, unable to race because of Erebos.
And there is Underworld Connections. That's a pretty dangerous Underworld Connections, and he's going to have to use it here. This is probably a defensive Blood Baron at this point, standing in front of powerful creatures on the other side of the board, just trying to dig your way out with card draw. And it looks like Joe did not find the requisite Devotion on top, so he's going to have to use the Greed ability, falling to 16 there, and just finds another swamp.
Ooh, a Greed reference. Greed's only 1 mana to activate, but it is similar.
It's pay 2 life.
Yeah. A good reference nonetheless.
I tried my best. Well, the flavor of Theros' Underworld is that gold is very plentiful there.
Okay.
And so they use a lot. They have a lot of greed, I suppose. Although they don't really care that much about gold. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. But the new greed art from Commander has a guy throwing up gold coins.
Oh,
There's
sure.
my connection. All right. Duress shows a pair of lands. And Josh Cho still a little bit under the 8 ball. He's at 3. Doesn't really have a ton of wiggle room here. He's going to have to try to find another creature, I think, to stand in front of the Gray Merchant to not fall to 1.
Or a removal spell.
Or a removal spell will work.
But he needs Joe to miss a lot of draws in a row. But a lot of his removal is a miss here, too, as he can't kill Blood Baron.
Right, as 3 swamps, Hero's Downfall isn't going to be able to answer pretty much anything. So, and Joe's taken 4 from his own Erebos. Looks like he's going to take 6 from his own Erebos, falling to 6. So what looked like a safe, secure cushion at 18 life isn't really going to be nearly secure enough. As attacking for 2 with the Gray Merchant, he gets a Hero's Downfall, and Josh might actually be able to pull this one out.
Yeah, now Joe's Erebus itself is now shut off. So is Blood Baron going to steal this even with Erebos in play?
Yeah. Joe can't draw any more cards with that Erebos. Lifebane Zombie shows that Joe has nothing, just 3 matching swamps and a Hero's Downfall. And so Josh decides that he can draw an extra card, maybe try and sneak in a Pack Rat or something here.
Gray Merchant kills him anyway, so no reason to play around it.
Right.
And so now it's a big draw for Joe.
Here it is.
And there it is.
Another land off the top for Joe Jancuk. And Joshua Cho is going to move to 8-1 with black-white control over Joe Jancuk's black-green devotion, putting him in good shape to top 8. Yet another open. We've seen him